Hi, guys. Since I'm not quite well enough to be there tonight, what I did want to do is go over some of the information about the next assignment, which will be a comparison contrast essay, and just talk a little bit about the short assignments that you'll have for this week that are due next Wednesday. And I wanted to start off by just mentioning that comparison and contrast is one of those standard organizations, and it comes in really, really handy for any kind of writing. So if I need to show the similarities of two things or the differences of two things or more, then I can utilize this organization and in some ways enable my reader to kind of see things as I'm seeing them. In other words, uh, I can present what I see as both sides of the story, per se. So, um, what I did want to talk about is also how this is going to be a little bit different than some of the writing assignments you might have had before with comparison contrast. So I'm just going to sort of read through this. I know you can read, but it just kind of keeps me on track. So far, you've written the narrative, you've written the extended definition. That's the concept that we talked about. And what most textbooks do is they simply ask the writer to compare or contrast something pretty basic. Like if I asked you to compare and contrast high school versus college, then that kind of thing is I'm looking at these two subjects and I'm going to show you what high school's like, and then I'm going to show you what college is like. I can make up my mind and decide which one I like better as a writer, or I can leave that up to my reader. But you really want to think about going beyond that basic kind of assignment. And here's why we're going to do things a little bit differently. We are bombarded every single day with other people's perceptions when we read or hear other writers' words. So, what you want to think about is the fact that not only are you maybe getting the news, but you're also getting some editorials with it. And that's a compare contrast where you want to start looking at who's telling me this? Why are they telling me this? Are they on one side or the other of the argument? And probably one of the things that is the most obvious example would be something like a um, a blog writer who's writing a political blog. So, not even at this stage looking at things like CNN or Fox, but just if I write a blog and I'm very liberal and I'm discussing a very liberal news story, um, I'm going to report the news, but I'm probably also going to give it a slant by using language that's going to support the news item if I think it's positive, or maybe the politician, or maybe support for legislation. So it's that kind of thing where you have to pay attention to what people are saying. And then think, why is that person saying it that way? And then same thing, if a conservative put together a political blog, it might have those same elements. But obviously that person is writing from a completely different perspective. And in your textbook, they talk about news events, and you're going to end up writing about that kind of thing. But sometimes we look at it because the answers aren't necessarily obvious. If I'm writing about politics and I'm liberal or conservative, doesn't matter. What I'm doing is I'm voicing my opinion. And that's perfectly fine. But hopefully, my reader is going to be able to figure out, oh, she's really liberal, or oh, she's really conservative. So, those are things that you can kind of see. But when you look at issues like the earthquake that happened in Haiti years ago, We may not necessarily think about an article or an author who's writing about something like an earthquake to have perception. But what you want to think about is it's there. If that writer is politically liberal or politically conservative, that will color the way that he's seeing the aftermath of an earthquake. If he is someone who has never traveled abroad and this is his first trip to a foreign country immediately after an earthquake, their perception is going to be different than someone who has visited many, many times and has been there when everything looked okay, and then when everything didn't look okay after the earthquake. So our perceptions are really shaped by all the things that we carry with us. So think about if you are writing, then you're going to look at things a little bit differently than I am. And that's what we're going to really examine. Now, one thing that I do want to point out, and do make sure you read through this little file. Oh, no, don't save it. Thank you. It's right here under week 5. But just to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about, when we are looking at things, because we are very, very visual animals, and someone says, I really love art, and you ask them, oh, what's your favorite piece? What's your favorite work of art? And they say, the Mona Lisa, because it's classical, it's wonderful, the colors, the shading, the composition. Da Vinci was a genius, and he kind of was. I mean, Mona Lisa is pretty impressive. And then if I look at maybe some of his other things, like his sketches, just as he was going through and getting ideas and looking for ways that he might want to put something together, what I see is a very specific form of art. And it's great. It's wonderful. I would give anything to be able to be a Da Vinci. But if someone said to me, what's your favorite art? I would probably say, you know what? I love Da Vinci and I love Michelangelo. And I really do love kind of medieval art. But probably my favorite type of art is Andy Warhol and pop art. And you know what? Even though the Mona Lisa is art, Andy Warhol and his things like the tomato soup can and different colored images of Marilyn Monroe and Elizabeth Taylor, those things are art as well. And that's where perception feeds into how you're going to look at everything. I know what Da Vinci is presenting to me. I know what Warhol is presenting to me. But they're coming at the same thing by 2 completely different avenues. And that's what writers do as well. So, take that back to, whoops, hang on, there we go. The Malcolm X articles and the Sandy Hook shooting articles. This assignment asks you to look at some very short articles about the assassination of Malcolm X. And if you don't know anything about him, you might just want to take a quick look at a even like a Wikipedia page, just to sort of, go, okay, I'm not quite sure who this guy is, and find out some info. However, don't read anything about his assassination. And the reason I don't want you to do that is because these articles discuss the assassination. And just like Warhol's coming one direction and Da Vinci's coming a different direction, you're going to see that the writers of these articles, even though they're writing about the exact same thing, which is the assassination of Malcolm X, they're looking at it differently and they're coming from different perspectives. So the questions that you will answer for this assignment will get you kind of thinking about the idea that perspective is important in writing, well, and anything. And then the Sandy Hook shooting assignment is very similar. There are several articles. I've listed them in the assignment, but there's a lot of articles that came out right after the Sandy Hook shooting, which they give some background in chapter 9. But what you want to look at is that some of the articles are coming from that much more conservative viewpoint that is really supporting gun rights. You'll find other articles that are coming at it from a way where they're looking at it and saying we need more restrictions on guns. And the articles are a bit about Sandy Hook. And I think that one was chosen by the editors of the book because it was so heartbreaking that it was very young children. Not to obviously dismiss a high school student, but the thought that these were very innocent victims really does put a different spin on the story. So same thing, I've asked you to answer some of the questions that are after each one of the articles. And what I want you to do is to really think about those questions and how you are answering them, not in the sense of is there a right answer and a wrong answer necessarily, but think about what you see in the article. Is this person pro or con something? Is this person someone who is dead set against people owning guns, or is this person maybe just simply asking for more regulations than what are already on the books? So these two assignments are going to get you in the direction of writing the comparison contrast essay, which we'll talk about in detail next week.